Well, good morning to everyone, and I know that we have many people joining our session today from the University Malaysia Kelantan. So I say to you, Selamat pagi, nama saya Kalan. That is as much Bahasa Malaysia as I know. Welcome everyone. This is Interpreting Turnitin's Similarity Report session. This session will run for about an hour. So I'm pleased to be part of the team based here in Australia. Thank you. I see in the chat, Parmi has said good morning. So good morning to you too. Okay, so before we start, we are running this session in webinar mode. So that means that you won't be able to turn on your camera or your microphone. So what I would ask is if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A feature that you can see here on your screen. That is the best way for you to ask questions. If you use the chat, then sometimes they can get lost and I won't have a chance to respond to them. So if you do have any questions, please place them in the Q&A at any stage throughout the session that I'll be running with you this morning. Okay, I am just going to put on my cursor here, make it a little bit easier. Now, just a bit of a quick disclaimer before we go any further. I will be demonstrating the full Turnitin Feedback Studio interface for you today, which does include the grade marks. Now, your institution, for those of you who are at UMK, you do have access to grade marks, so this hopefully will be familiar for you. But if we have anyone joining us from other institutions, you may not have access to the grade mark features, but you will see them as part of what I'm demonstrating for you today. So our learning objectives today with you, there's a lot here on the screen, but I promise you it's all very easy and we will get through it within the hour, will be to comfortably differentiate. So to understand the difference between plagiarism and text similarity, to understand how to use Turnitin as a formative tool with effective feedback and grading, build awareness around what are some of those factors that are going to influence similarity within your students' work, okay, to understand academic misconduct, and to have an efficient workflow when dealing with plagiarism, and finally to have a very good understanding of Turnitin assignment settings as a teacher. I'm going to start this session now with a quick poll, and I can see that we've got a few more people joined us now, so I'm just going to have a quick poll that will pop up on screen for you. So just launch that now. Very much appreciate if you could please just take a moment to give me an indication of how confident you feel using Turnitin Feedback Studio. So that's just popped up hopefully for you on your screen. Just give me an indication. Okay. So I can see we've got a few more people. Just leave it just another couple of seconds and then I'll close those results. Great, so you can see those results there on the screen at the moment. So we've got a group of people sort of sitting around the middle. No one is feeling no confidence at all, but no one's feeling very confident. So everyone's kind of sitting in the middle, and that's absolutely fine. I would expect that for this session that I'll have some people who are very experienced users, and some people who might be a little bit new. But even if you're an experienced user, sometimes there might be aspects of the product that is worthwhile revisiting. So what is Turnitin? So I'll start, for this is obviously pitched at those people who are very new to using it. A lot of people think of Turnitin as being a text plagiarism detection tool. But what it actually does is detect similarity in the text. So when students submit their work through Turnitin, we are going to compare your students' work with our 3 databases. So the first one is all previously submitted student work. The next is web content. So this is websites. And then finally, journals and publications. So where we find any similarity between any of the text in your student's document and any of the sources within our repository, we're going to go through and highlight that for you, as you can see here on screen. And for those of you who are familiar, you would be familiar with this particular interface here, where this section here that's been highlighted in with a color and a number is indicating a text similarity that relates to this particular source. Okay, so from there, it will be up to you as the teacher to make a determination as to whether or not that is plagiarism or if that's acceptable similarity. We also have the AI writing indicator, as you can see here on your screen. So the difference between text similarity and plagiarism is when text similarity is when students use the ideas and words of another person within their own work. Now, this is an expected part of good academic writing, especially at a university level. So we expect that students will include that there will be text similarity within your students' work. It becomes plagiarism only when students use those ideas or words without proper acknowledgement, credit, or attribution. Okay, so that's a key difference between those two. So as an example here, we've got a passage of text on our screen. A paragraph here where we have a section that's been highlighted as a similarity match. Now, as the teacher, what I need to be looking at is, has the student given an indication that they've copied these words from somewhere? In this case, they have used quotation marks here to indicate that it is a direct quote. They've also included a citation within the body of the text and a reference at the end in a bibliography. So in this case, we have correct academic writing. Okay, so this is text similarity, but it is not plagiarism. Here we have an example of the same passage of text. In this case, the student has used quotation marks to indicate that it is a direct quote, but they have not cited the source, either within the text or within the bibliography at the end of the document. So this is what we might call inadvertent. The student has made a partial attempt to indicate or attribute these words to someone else, but they have not provided the full details. So this would be something that we would provide feedback to them on. And then finally here, this is what we're looking for. This student has copied these words, but they have given no indication that they were written by someone else. This is what we call plagiarism. So the Turnitin interface, the Turnitin Feedback Studio similarity report will show you text similarity, but you as the teacher will need to have a look and see, is it similarity or is it plagiarism? Has the student attributed their source properly or have they not? So the next idea, the concept is the idea of expected similarity. And there's a notion that we should be setting a particular threshold, that a similarity score that goes over a certain percentage is wrong, and that if it's under that, that it's okay. Okay, that is not a very helpful way to use the Turnitin Feedback Studio similarity report. So the idea that an expected similarity score will change based on the type of assessment that you are conducting with your students. As an example, if we were to look at a creative writing assessment, we would see that the expectations would be that the student would use a lot of their own words, thoughts, and ideas, that it would not contain much, if any, research, and that there would be no need for referencing and citation in that case, because there would be a high degree of original work there from the student. So we would expect to see less similarity in a document like that. If we were to consider short answer responses, so this would be where every student in the class is responding to the same set of questions. And so everyone has the same set of questions and they write a sentence or two or maybe a paragraph in response. We would expect that there would be similarity within the responses that the students provide. Often those questions relate to providing definitions. So, there's only certain ways to write a definition or describe a particular word, and also pulling terms and facts out that are common. Short answer response style assessments often relate to a particular chapter or a particular book or a journal article. They might relate to a particular scenario or an experiment that's being conducted. So everyone's referring to the same sort of set of sources. So it's very likely that people will pull information and describe it in a very similar way, which will result in similarity. So we can expect to see it's very probable there. When we talk about a research-based assessment, so this is what we would think of as an assignment within a university. So this is where we expect to see evidence of academic research. We expect to see the inclusion of quotes and ideas from experts. As a result, we would expect to see references and citations, and in some cases, depending on the discipline, we may expect to see text strings that should not be altered. So this is where students might just need to write something out in full, that there's no other way to correctly refer to something other than just writing it out in full. So a good example of that might be when referring to legislation or case law. So those are a couple of examples there. So in that case, we would expect to see more. So you will need to, there's no right or wrong similarity score from Turnitin's perspective. You will need to determine what is an appropriate amount of similarity within your student's work. So we have an example here on screen. So we have two documents here. The one on the left has a similarity score of 5%, and the one on the right has a similarity score of 30%. Now, in some cases, many people might think that this paper over here with the very low similarity score is acceptable. You know, that this is the better paper, that there's less problems with this paper compared to this one over here, which has a similarity score of 30%. But what we need to do is we need to look at those similarity matches before we can decide whether or not the student has done anything wrong. So in this case, if we have a look over at this paper on the left-hand side, we see that the whole of this first paragraph has been highlighted as a similarity match. So we found an exact match for this whole paragraph. So the next step for us as teachers would be to consider, has the student given an indication that they've copied those words? Have they provided a source or acknowledged the source here? Now, in this case, they have not. There's no quotation marks, there's no reference or citation included as part of this. So we see this as copy and paste plagiarism. This student has copied these words and they're trying to pretend like they're their own. So this score of 5%, even though it's very low, there's actually that one instance is plagiarism, and this is something that we would need to address with our student. Whereas if we consider this score over here on the paper on the right, we see that the first match is the essay question, and we would not be concerned that the student had written the essay question at the top of their page or that it had created a similarity match. The next here is the citation. So once again, we're not concerned when student citations create similarity matches. That's expected. Next, we have common facts or short matches. So if we consider the words apples are a good source of nutrition, we might see that is an example where that is a very common phrase. It's a very common fact, and it's not something that we would expect that students need to provide a reference for. So that is a very common type of similarity match within students' work. Next, we have a quote here where the student has provided not only the quote, the full quote with quotation marks, they've also included the author's name, the year, and the page number of that publication. So that is perfect academic writing. Yes, it is a similarity match, but it's not plagiarism. Next, we have a situation where a student has done some paraphrasing. So we can see here that they've included a citation at the end, which is fantastic. And there's been a couple of short instances, very small similarity matches within the student's work, where they have been unable to reword something in their own writing, in their own words. So you would need to make a determination as their teacher about whether or not they had been very effective with their paraphrasing. But in this case, this would probably not be considered to be a very serious case of plagiarism. And then finally, we have our reference list here. So we expect that our references will generate similarity matches and that they'll all be displayed in different colors, indicating that the student has done independent research to bring all of those sources together to support the argument that they're making within their work. So let's take a look at some examples now. Just a reminder, I will be expecting you to put your questions into the Q&A throughout this session. So if you have any comments or questions that you would like to make, please use the Q&A feature within Zoom to ask your questions during the session. There may not necessarily be time at the end of the session to stop and have a Q&A. So please make sure if you are curious, please make sure that you pop your questions into the Q&A throughout this session. So let's have a look at some examples now. So to begin with, I will just explain the layout of the screen so that everyone is familiar. So you can see I have my student's name here up the top, so Seiji Amasawa, and Seiji has written about the Great Barrier Reef, which is the very famous geographical landmark off the coast of Queensland in Australia. Up here, we have the space where there is an opportunity to put a grade. Can we detect AI-generated text? Yes, Mohammed, great question. Thank you so much. I will be demonstrating, I have some sample documents that I will use to demonstrate the AI writing report for you in just a moment. So great question. Thanks very much. Okay, so we have an area where we can enter the grade here. We can use these arrows here to navigate between the student submissions, so between the assignment submissions for the students in this class. Yeah, I can also use this drop-down menu to show all of those submissions here as well. Okay, up here, the little question mark is going to provide you with the links to help articles. So this is very helpful if you want to become more familiar with different aspects of the interface. You can access the help guides here. These blue tools here on the right-hand side, these relate to our grading and feedback tools. So this is quick marks, feedback summary, and rubrics as well. Here we have our red tools, which all relate to the Similarity report. We have grey tools that allow us to do things like download this report and also to access some information about the metadata of this particular report. You can see here that we have the AI writing report is available here. Now, for this particular document, we don't have an AI writing report. Our report requires a minimum of 300 words before an AI writing report can be generated. Now, as you can see, if we have a look down here in the bottom left-hand corner, we can see that this document only has 193 words. So it doesn't meet the threshold, the minimum requirements for generating that AI report. But as I mentioned before, and in relation to the question from Mohammed, I will be showing you some AI writing reports in just a moment. We can also, just so you know, you can zoom in and zoom out to make things more comfortable for you on your screen. Now, what I would like you to do is we'll have a look at this work here on screen. Okay, what I'm going to draw your attention to begin with is this particular one item here over on the right-hand side as part of the red tools, this flags. If you see flags, if you see it says 1 or 2 here next to the flag icon when you open your student's work, it's very important that you stop and review that straight away. We use flags to highlight for you behavior, student behavior that is often linked with academic misconduct and plagiarism. Okay, so we can see here that the first one that we have is hidden text. So if we have a look at our document here, it looks very normal. But if I turn on the hidden text flag, you can see that I have these red rectangles that appear. Now, students use these for a variety of reasons. So to begin with, this student has used quotation marks around their entire submission. So they've opened them at the start of the first paragraph and closed them at the end of the third paragraph. The reason that students do this is because they're aware that within Turnitin, there is a feature available or a setting that's available to instructors like yourself to ignore quoted materials, okay, which is essentially you saying, if you see something that is in quotes, do not look for text similarity within that. So students are aware that that's a feature and that some teachers use that. So the students think that by going through and using quotes like this, that it will reduce their similarity score. Okay, so in this case, we have a very high similarity score, 73% in this case, because all of this text has been copied. Now, the student is hoping that by using these quotation marks here, that you will use that setting to ignore quotes. So if I just show you that very quickly, what that looks like, exclude quotes, and then apply those changes, you can see that this score is going to drop to 7% from 73. Okay, so you do have to be mindful if you are using the exclude quotes feature that students are aware that it exists. In some cases, they're going to use these white quotation marks to try and disguise their academic misconduct. The other trick that students try to use is this, where they put, rather than a space in between their words, they use a white character. In this case, it is a comma, but it could be anything. Now, they do that because they're hoping that that will trick Turnitin, that Turnitin will look at this as a big, long sort of stretch of characters and go looking for that within the repository. And obviously, no one writes with commas between their words, so it won't generate a match. Now, we're aware that students try this tactic, so we're going to highlight it for you, because if they're doing this, they're doing it on purpose. They're doing it to try and cheat. So if you see something like this, you should address that with your student. Finally, this student here has not been able to hit the word count. They have not been able to reach the required word count. So some students will go through and they will use white text down the bottom. So you can't see it, but it is going to inflate the word count within the document. So just be mindful that if you see hidden text, make sure you turn it on and investigate each one of these within your student's work. The next one here is replace characters. Now, once again, if we have a look at this work, it looks very normal to us, but in this case, they've used replace characters. Now, the best way to describe this is if we have a look at these different letters from different alphabets. So this is what we call the Latin E. This is what's used when writing in English. You'll see that it looks very, very similar to this character, which is from the Cyrillic or the Russian alphabet. Okay, they look very similar. Likewise, we have O here. So once again, this is the O that we use when we write in English, and it looks very similar to this character from the Greek alphabet. So visually, to our eyes, they look the same. But to a computer, they're very different characters. So the students try to go through and they change all of the E's from English E's to this character. And they're hoping once again to trick Turnitin so that Turnitin does not make a similarity match. Now, this technique does not work. We can still detect the similarity. We flag it for you, though, as a teacher, because we want you to be aware that your student has tried to cheat. They have tried to trick Turnitin. And this is very concerning. This is something that you would need to address, you should address with your student. So if you see flags within your student's work, please stop and investigate those straight away so that you can address your student's behavior with them. Okay, I'm going to jump into another one now. Okay, so we have another piece of work here. So this is by a student, Samuel Vimes. And Samuel is writing about another geographical landmark in Australia. It's a rock formation here. You can see a photo called the 12 Apostles. Now, if you see here within Sam's work, there are no flags. Okay, so Sam has not displayed any of those behaviors that we saw in the previous work, which is great. But now if we have a look at these similarity matches, we see that this paper has a score of 55. So I'm going to start at the top of the document and I'm going to work my way down to the bottom so that we can understand how those similarity matches look. And because not all similarity matches are plagiarism. So to begin with, we can see here that in the opening paragraph, we have a couple of similarity matches. So we have number 12 and number 10, and they relate to this list here on the right-hand side of screen that shows the matches here. Okay, these percentages relate to the word count. So in this case, the word count for this document is 664 words. So a 2% word count means that we've got about 12 words in that from that particular source. And from this one, for 1%, it means we've got about six or seven words from that particular source. So these are very, very small matches for a document of this size. Now, if you're working at a university and you're looking at a document that has 5,000 or 10,000 words or more, a 1% match can still be very substantial. Okay, so you do have to think about these percentages in relation to word count as well. Okay, but in this case, we've got the first match here says the 12 apostles located on the. What we've got here is something that is a very, very common wording. Okay, yes, it is the same wording that's been found on a website, but in this case, it's not very important wording. It's not a statement or a piece of data that you would expect the student to have to provide evidence for. So we can safely just ignore this. Similar, when we have a look at this one here, we see that it relates to the location of this particular landmark, that it's located in the Port Campbell National Park. Once again, that is not information that we would generally expect students to have to provide evidence to support. That is what we would call general knowledge. So we have two matches here that represent 3%. If we add 2% and 1% here, that represent 3% of the total wording. So we can just ignore those, okay, and just move on. We don't need to exclude them or anything. We can just look at them and quickly evaluate and make a decision. Here we have a quote here. So the student is directly quoting and they're using quotation marks to indicate that they've copied this wording, which is fantastic. And then they've also included here a citation as well to acknowledge the source. So perfect writing, great. We don't need to exclude this. It is not plagiarism, so we can just move on. Here we have an example where the student has provided another direct quote. So they have used quotation marks. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to see, has the student provided acknowledgement of the source? Now, we can see within this paragraph, there is no citation. Okay, there's no reference to the source of these words. So in this case, we would leave some feedback for our students to indicate that they should be providing a fully referencing throughout their work. Here we've got an example where the student has made an attempt to paraphrase. And this is something that is very common. You'll see this a lot within your students' work. So you can see that we have a partial match. So we see here that we have some words that have been highlighted in blue, and then some words that are not highlighted, and then some more words that have been highlighted in the same blue, and then some words that have not been. This means that the student has found some text online, and then they've changed a few words and used it within theirs. Now, in this case, the student has provided a reference here at the end, so they are citing their source to indicate that they have copied these words from somewhere, and they have made an attempt to paraphrase, paraphrasing being the skill of writing out a concept in your own words or explaining something in your own words. Now, from here, I could do a quick check. I can compare the student's work to the original by clicking on this number. And you can see it's going to load up and it's going to show me the wording from this website where it's found the match. And I can then make a decision as a teacher about whether or not the student has done the right thing. Have they changed those words enough? Okay, because paraphrasing is not just about changing some words. It's about trying to rewrite the concept in an original way. So you would need to make a decision as the teacher as to whether or not the student had done the right thing there. Coming down here, we have this paragraph here. So you can see that this has been, the whole of this paragraph has been highlighted except for one word. There are no quotes, quotation marks to indicate that the student has copied these words, and there's no citation either. So this is copy and paste plagiarism. Okay, this is where the student has copied these words from a website or from a book, and they are trying to pretend like they're their own. So this is definitely the kind of behavior that we are on the lookout for. This next example is what we call mosaic plagiarism. So a mosaic, as many people would know, is a piece of art that is made up of many small colored tiles. And here we have mosaic plagiarism because we have plagiarism that is made up of many small similarity matches. Okay, so you can see that within this paragraph, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different sources, 4 different similarity matches within the same paragraph. None of these matches have a citation attached to them. So the student is not indicated that they've copied these words. And each one of these matches is quite long. Okay, we're talking about most of a sentence. Okay, so it's very unlikely that this would just be a coincidence that the student happened to write this out in this way. So what they've done is they've taken a sentence from this book and a sentence from this website and a sentence from this journal article and a sentence from this website, and they've pushed them together to try and make a new paragraph. Now, this is also plagiarism. So this is definitely something that you would need to be looking at your students' work and providing them feedback on this. When we come down here, we see this is an example of where a student has used what's called a text spinner. So there are websites that students can go to where they can copy and paste text in, and it will go through and rearrange and rewrite it for them to try and make it look original. Okay, and then they copy that text into their assignment and they submit it, and they hope that Turnitin doesn't find the similarity. Now, sometimes that can be very sophisticated, very advanced, but there are still some clues that are left behind that you as the teacher can look for. So to begin with, if we consider these two paragraphs of text, we can see that there is 1, 2, 3 matches to the same source. So number 2, all of these are coming from this same website over here. Within this, there is no citation. There is no acknowledgement of this particular website. So that's very unlikely that it would be coincidence that the student would write something original that had 3 matches to a source. So that is the first sign that the student has done something wrong. Next, we need to look at the language that the student has used. Okay, we need to have a look that there is some unusual phrasing, things like instantly of advertising splendor and celestial intercession. These are very unusual phrases in English. So when we compare what the student has written with the original text from the website, we can start to see that it says by some divine intervention. Divine intervention is a very common phrase in English. We can see that that is very similar to celestial intercession. So you can start to see that the student or one of these websites that does the sort of the rearranging has simply used a thesaurus to look for words that have a similar meaning, but it now makes less sense when we read it. We can also see this phrase here, instantly of advertising splendor. That is not something that is common within English. It doesn't really make sense. However, where it says here, a flash of marketing brilliance, those words have a similar meaning and make much more sense. So we can look for examples like that. We also have a look for examples where it makes mistakes. Now, in this case, the student has said here, they were renamed the missionaries. Now, the original text says that they were called the 12 apostles. Okay, they were renamed the apostles. Now, in the Christian faith, in things like the Bible, the word apostle and missionary can have a similar meaning. Okay, they might be used interchangeably. But when we're talking about a rock formation that is called the apostles, calling them the missionaries is incorrect. So as an expert in your particular field, you would be on the lookout for small mistakes like that, where words that might have the same meaning somewhere else do not have the same meaning within your particular discipline. So be on the lookout for things like that. And when you see that, you can be reasonably assured that the student has either gone through and used a thesaurus to look for words for synonyms, words that have similar meaning, or they've used a website that has done it for them. Okay, and once again, that is plagiarism. Okay, that is not their own work, and they have not acknowledged where those ideas came from. Here we have a reference section here, and we can see that all of these references have similarity matches, which is great, except for this final one down here. This one does not have a similarity match. That is a very good indication that this is a fake reference, okay, that the student has included this to try and make it look like they have done more research than they have. So once again, this is sort of something to look for within your reference sections to see, do all of the references have a similarity match? If not, then I would be very interested to look at this one to see, is this actually a legitimate source? Okay, So as you can see, as we've worked our way through this document, even though we have a score of 55%, not all of these similarity matches are indicative of plagiarism. Some of them are acceptable, like these ones here, where we don't mind these ones, and this one here is okay. These ones here are problematic, and we would provide some feedback to the student. And then we have some down here where the student is cheating, okay, where they have committed academic misconduct. So coming back over here to the right-hand side of screen, we have what's called the match overview. So this is going to show you the most likely sources that the student has, where we have found those similarity matches. So you can see here that there's a list of 12. Okay. What we can do is we can come down to this next item on the list here, and this is going to show us all sources. And you can see that we actually have many, many, many more. Now, the reason for this is that the same text can appear in multiple locations within our repository. So if we have a look at this particular paragraph as an example, so it says, although their name suggests, we can see that this has been copied from this particular website here. If I click on this next website and come down to that same paragraph, I can see that portions of this paragraph are also found on this particular website. And if I go to the next source down, I can see that once again, portions are found on that website and this website and this website. So all of these websites have actually copied content from this one. So we can sometimes find multiple sources for the same content. So if you want to investigate a little bit further, you can come here to this list here. Now, if you would like to exclude particular sources, you can also do that from here. So as an example, if I wanted to exclude this source and not include it as part of my similarity report, I would highlight it and then I would click here and then pick the boxes that relate to the sources and then exclude. And you'll see that my score goes from 55 to 42. I can come to this list here and I can see all of the sources that have been excluded and I can restore them as well. And you can see that that's now come back up to 55. Here we have our filters. Now I touched on these earlier. So the first one being exclude quotes, which means that it's going to look for any quoted materials within the student's work, any quoted content, and it's not going to check it for similarity matches. So it's going to bring your similarity score down. Now, as I demonstrated on the previous piece of work here, if we use this, we need to be careful. We need to be mindful that sometimes students will use those quotation marks to reduce the amount of work that is checked by Turnitin for similarity matches. So you might be missing out on some examples where the student has copied work. Okay. Next one here is excluding the bibliography. So if we exclude bibliography, it's going to ignore this section of the student's work and not look for similarity matches. Now, yes, that will bring the similarity score down. However, it will make it harder for you to identify when students are using fake references as part of their work. Okay, so you just need to be mindful. The next one here is exclude sources that are less than a certain number of words or percentages. Okay, so once again, this is so that we can try and reduce the amount of similarity matches and remove all of those very short matches. Okay, now this is something that is, potentially you might use to try and remove some of the matches like we saw in this first paragraph here, very short matches that increase our similarity score here. Okay, but you do need to be mindful that sometimes if you do that, once again, it may mean that you miss some plagiarism from the student where they have copied words and not acknowledged them. Okay, so you just need to be mindful that by using these filters and settings that you may miss out on some of the student's work. Okay, so the next paper I'm going to look at here is I'm now going to look at the AI writing report. So you can see here I've now got a new piece of students' work here on my screen. And over here, you can see that we've got the AI score. So if I click on this, it's going to open in a new report. Now, when we're looking at this report, any of the text that is highlighted in this blue-green color indicates that our AI writing report has detected AI writing. So in this case, it is saying that 100% of the text within this document has been written by AI. And that is absolutely true. This essay was written by ChatGPT. So this is what you can expect to see for a piece of work that has been written by ChatGPT. Okay. Now, as we come down, you'll note that the reference section here has not been highlighted. Now, in this case, what I want you to have a look at here is where it says qualifying text. Okay, so how much of this submission has been generated by AI? 100% of the qualifying text. When we say qualifying text, what we mean is that we are only looking for AI writing within sentences and paragraphs. Okay, so within text that looks like this within your student's work. If you have asked your students to provide lists, so bullet points and things like that, then we are not going to be looking at that text for AI writing. Okay, our detector works best for what's called prose writing, so writing in sentences and paragraphs like this. Okay, so just so you're aware. Now, I know that there's a lot of interest in learning more about the AI writing report. What I am going to do here is just share some of these resources with you very quickly. So we have our FAQ here. So I'm just going to pop some of these links into the chat. Please feel free to open these and bookmark them so you can have a look at them later. You can see we have a very extensive frequently asked questions section. Here we have a set of resources for teachers, academic integrity in the age of AI. So as you can see here, we have some professional learning resources so that you can familiarize yourself with AI writing. We also have some resources here that you can use to evaluate your assessments to see how likely they are to be subject to AI misuse. And we have some resources for students as well. So once again, I'm going to pop these down here for you into the chat so that you can review them at a later time. And finally, we have just some general instructions here about the AI writing report. So I invite you to have a look at the chat, open each one of those in your browser and set them aside so that you can have a look at them in more detail once this session has concluded. Okay, so in this case, we would have a strong degree of confidence that this student here has used ChatGPT to write very large portions, the majority of their assignment. So what I'm going to show you now is a piece of student work where we've got a much lower score. So we have here 25%. Okay, so this is an example where we've got the student has written some of the work and some of the work has been generated by ChatGPT. So we can see here that all of this first paragraph has been written by ChatGPT. And then as we scroll down, just zoom out a little bit, as we scroll down, we see that this section here has also, that our detector has found evidence of AI writing here in this section, okay? So what, as a teacher, the most useful way for you to approach this is to consider this as an area of interest, okay? Just because we have a score here that indicates that there has been some AI writing within this, you cannot use that as all of your evidence against a student, okay, to have a conversation with a student. You should take a closer look at these areas that have been highlighted to see if you can find other evidence that would make you suspicious that this was not the student's work. So has the style of writing changed? Is it written in a different way to how the student normally writes? Is the font different? Is there differences in the way that the text appears on the screen, as an example? That can be small, but it can also be an indication. Also check the references as well. Are the references correct? Are these real sources? That is one thing that tools like ChatGPT are not very good at doing. They're not very good at making sure that the sources are actually real. So you can go through and investigate these particular areas, focus your investigation on these areas that have been highlighted to see if you can find other evidence that would make you suspicious of the student doing the incorrect thing. So just a recap of the workflow that we've been through here. So when we first look at a student's piece of work, we're going to check those document flags. We're going to look for evidence of hidden characters and replaced characters within the student's work. Okay, and if we see evidence of those, we're going to raise our concerns. Next, we're going to look through those similarity matches. Remember, not every similarity match is plagiarism. Okay, so you will get very good, I'm sure many of you are, at seeing those similarity matches within the student's work and making a very quick decision about whether it's okay or whether it's something that you need to investigate. Then we're going to have a look at that AI writing score. Okay, we're going to have a look at that and see, does that raise any suspicions that we have, or does it confirm suspicions? Perhaps you might already feel like the student has used some AI tools as part of their writing. And then when you check the report, you see that we've also flagged AI in that particular section. Next step would be to consider the student's intentions. Have they made some honest mistakes as part of this? Are they not very aware of how to write in a good academic style? And what support can you provide to them? Or have they been very blatant and malicious with their academic misconduct? And finally, you would take steps to address your concerns. So you might leave some feedback for a student about their work, perhaps reminding them that they need to provide proper referencing throughout their work, or they need to be very thorough with doing that. If it's more serious, then you might consider who in your university can you refer this to? Is there a team within your university that investigates, cases of academic misconducts and provides sanctions as well? So you would need to make that determination in line with your university's policies. So now I'd like to talk to you through the typical assignment settings. Now, this is going to vary. The screenshots that you're seeing here on screen are going to vary depending on whether you use Turnitin via a learning management system or whether you use it directly through turnitin.com. Okay, so the screenshots that you see here may look a little bit different to how you use them, but in many cases, the settings that I'm going to describe are available regardless of how you're using Turnitin. So we have to begin with the start date, the due date, and the post date. So the start date is the date that it appears to the students or the earliest date that they can submit their work. The due date is obviously the due date and time when you expect that work to be submitted. The post date here is when the grading and feedback is made available to your students. Okay, so if you have these dates and times set the same, as you are grading and providing feedback on each piece of students' work, on each individual, those individuals will be able to see that work. Whereas if you set the post date 3 weeks after the due date, that means that you will be able to do all of your grading and feedback with the students not seeing any of those results. And then on the post date, the grading and feedback will be made available to them. Next one here is when do you want to see those similarity reports? So there are 3 options generally. The first one here, immediately. First report is final. This means that the student can only submit one piece of work once. And as soon as they submit that piece of work, we're going to generate a similarity report for them. Okay. The second one here, immediately, but can overwrite reports until the due date, means that students can submit multiple pieces of work, drafts, or multiple versions of the same piece of work, as many times as they like up to the due date. And every time they submit a piece of work, it's going to generate a new similarity report. So every time they upload a draft, it's going to remove the old draft and it's going to generate a new similarity report for them. Finally, on the due date, so students can submit as many drafts as they like, and you can look at those drafts, but you're not going to see a similarity report generated until the due date of that assignment. Okay, so 3 different options there. Generally, we recommend this middle option here because we think that students should be given the opportunity to look at their similarity report so that they can address any mistakes that they have made before they submit their final piece of work to you. Now, we also have exclusions here. Now, I touched on these a moment ago when we were looking at the reports. You can exclude quoted materials. So this is anything that's quoted within the student's work, and also the bibliographic materials, so the reference section of the student's work. These settings are available to you, but I've also warned you that sometimes if you use these exclusions, yes, they can bring that similarity score down, but they can also make it harder for you to detect plagiarism in your student's work. So be mindful. This is a very, very important setting, and this is one that causes a lot of problems for teachers. This question here says, submit papers to standard paper repository or no repository. If you submit your student's work to the standard paper repository, it means that it will be available, it will be used for text matching against. Okay. If you say no repository, it means that that student's work does not go into the repository and will not be used for text matching. Now, I work with a lot of institutions, and what they do is the teachers put everything into the repository, even their drafts, even the student's drafts. So the student will submit a draft of their thesis, and the teacher will put it through Turnitin and submit it to the repository. Then 6 months later, when the student submits a final version of their thesis, it shows that it is nearly 100% similar to the draft that was submitted earlier. And that causes a lot of concern and makes people feel very nervous and scared, okay, that they have done the wrong thing. So we only put final versions of students' work into the repository. If it is a draft, we say no repository. Okay, these will not be stored. Okay, also useful if it includes a lot of private information. Okay, so please be very mindful of that. You're going to make your life a lot easier, and your admin and your administrator's life and your student's life a lot easier by understanding how to use this. So remember, if it's a final version, then we have that going to the repository. If you are getting students to submit a draft version of a document, then we say no repository. With this one here, you can choose which of the Turnitin repositories you want to compare your students' work to. So you can see here, you have the option to compare it to the student paper repository. So this is all pieces of work that have been previously submitted by teachers across the world. Current and archived internet, so this is websites and periodicals, journals, and publications. So you can tick or untick these. You do need to tick at least one if you want a similarity report. Now, I'd like to share with you some help resources. We are getting close to the end of the presentation, and I'd like to share with you some help resources here. To begin with, the Quick Start Guide, which is here. So once again, I'm going to share this link with you in the chat, and you can open this up. This is specific to those of you who are using Turnitin.com. Okay, so you can see that there's some information here, some detailed information to help you get started. Next is help.turnitin.com. Now from here, as we scroll down the page, you'll see that this here is the first product that you're using, Feedback Studio. So you'll click here. Next, it will say, how do you use Feedback Studio? I know that some of you at UMK are using it via the Turnitin website. So if you click here, you can see that there are instructions for you as the instructor. So everything that you would need to know is here. And for your students as well. Now, I also know that you also use Moodle, and perhaps your administrator who's here on the call can maybe just confirm with me in the chat which particular type of integration that you use. But you can see here that we have a set of instructions for Moodle as well. And then from here, depending on the style of integration that you are using, we can see that there are two sets of instructions here. So if I click on this type, you can see that we have instructor instructions there, and this type here, you can see that we have from here as well. So your administrator will be able to provide you with the best advice about which particular integration you are using. Next is getting to know Feedback Studio. So this is some resources for you as the teacher, once again, specifically about things like disrupting plagiarism, paraphrasing, all resources that you can use in class with your students to help them understand good academic writing. We also have some references or some resources here for your students to use as well, so you can send them these links. Okay, so some good resources there that I've shared with you. The best person to talk to at your institution level would be potentially your learning and teaching area or your IT administrators who would be in control of your Turnitin account. And finally, you can reach out to the Turnitin team as a last resort, australia-onboarding@turnitin.com if you have any specific questions. Now I'm going to run a new poll now just to assess where people, how people feel. So if you could all just take a moment here to let me know how you're feeling now that we have approaching the end of this particular session here, and how are you feeling a little bit more confident in using this this platform? Wow, this is great. I'm seeing some very encouraging responses coming through. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll just leave that there for just a moment. Now, what I would like you to do as well is invite you to fill in a quick feedback survey for me. Now, if you have a mobile phone, you can scan that QR code that's on your screen at the moment, or if you're watching this recording, please scan the QR code and go to the website. Otherwise, I'm sharing with you via the chat a link to the survey. It is anonymous. It says it'll take you 2 minutes, but I promise you it won't. It will only take you about 1 minute. There's only a few questions, and I would really appreciate it if you could please take the time to let me know which aspects of this training you have liked, and if there's anything that we can do to improve things in the future. So I very much appreciate you taking a moment to complete that. So this brings me to the end of this of the session here. So on behalf of the team based here in Australia, so we've got Nick, Michelle, Jess, and myself. We are the customer onboarding team. It's been a real pleasure to deliver this session for you today. As I mentioned, I know that many of you are coming from University Malaysia, Kelantan. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. So hopefully this has been a very good session for those of you who are either new to using Feedback Studio as an introduction, or for those of you who are very familiar with using it, maybe you've learned a little bit more about how to use and interpret the Similarity reports. So thank you very much for your time. We do have just another couple of minutes remaining. So if there are any last minute questions, I'd encourage you to just pop them into the Q&A. Otherwise, if you'd like to use the reactions, you can just sort of give me a thumbs up on the screen or something like that to indicate that you're happy with things as they are, and we go from there. Beautiful. Okay, I'm seeing some emojis kind of pop up. I'll just give everyone another couple of minutes. All right. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today, everyone. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the day. I'll send out a follow-up email with some more information, with some links and a copy of the recording that you can download and watch as well. So thanks very much, everyone, for your time today. All the best with using Turnitin.